Welcome to the demonstration series on managing ICX 7000 series switches using SmartZone for SmartZone Release 5.0 and ICX firmware version 8.8.80. In this demonstration, I will show you the interface functionality and capabilities of SmartZone version 5.0 to manage Ruckus ICX switches running firmware version 8.8.80. I will cover the information that can be obtained from and operations that can be performed on Ruckus ICX switches. So let's get started. So to view the associated switches within SmartZone, we log in and select the Switches tab. So let's do that. We click on the Switches tab we see over the left here. As we can see, there's two groups here. One has been configured, the other one is default, which is the default group, and any switches that are listed in that default group are simply not assigned to a switch group yet. This causes their information not to be collected from the switch, such as its config, SNMP events, switch port details, and so forth, but rather the basic information to help identify the switch, and it's collected, such as its MAC address, the model, the IP address, and its firmware version. So once the switch is moved into a switch group, as we can see here, first group that's been configured there, the switch becomes associated and connections are established to start gathering detailed information from that switch. As we can see here, we have two switches within that switch group. So let's examine the information that is gathered for each switch that's assigned and configured within this group. So first of all, we see a Lab ICX1 here. We see we have a switch name. We can provide a status of it, which is online here. We also see the total ports in the switch, regardless of their status. So we can see the port is 16 total ports. However, we can see their status over here in the three left icons that we see here. The first one is ports that are up and active, which is in the blue. We see the amber are ports that are accumulating errors or causing any errors. We would see that number giving us a value of the ports that are having that happening. And the red is for ports that have been configured as admin up or enabled but do not have any connections to them. So any remaining ports not listed in these three icons are simply ports that are admin down. As we move on, we can see any alarms that are been triggered by those switches, as well as the uptime of the switch, and then finally the firmware and the last backup that's been performed on that switch as well. Now within this field, we can check the gearbox here, and we can add additional information or remove additional information if we so choose, as well as the display default of 8 switches or entries that we have listed within that pane. We can also see that we can do any searching of keywords, whether it be an or an and statement, when we're doing searches with the search table we see up at the top right there as well. Now from here, when we select a switch, we do have some more options up at the top, and we click on this, you can see we can do a config backup or schedule a firmware upgrade on that. Now we have dedicated videos within this series that cover the specifics to the configuration management as well as scheduling the firmware. I would encourage you to take a look at those videos and be able to provide you with more detail on those particular features. In this video, we're going to concentrate more on the tabs that we see down below, providing more detail about the switches that we have selected up at the top window we have here. So the first tab we have is a general tab, and as we scroll down, we see that the first section, which is the info, provides many of the details in the upper section just mentioned. However, additional information is listed, such as its gateway configuration, switch or stack details, and how many switch members there are within the stack switch if it's configured or a member of. The next section is a status summary, which provides a display of many of the same items listed in the upper section, such as the switch status, current alarms, uptime, and so forth, but also the timestamp of the last backup and just a general information of the switch overall. As we move to the next tab, we see there is a backup and restore, and as I mentioned earlier, this particular section has a dedicated video providing you details of what can be performed here. Quickly you can see you can do a config restore, compare differences between configs, the config view, and so forth. But we'll talk about that more in the video dedicated towards the backup and restore of the configs. The next tab is the Ports tab. And this tab provides an overview of the port status of each switch at the top and more detail as you scroll down to the bottom of this particular display. So as this loads and we scroll down, we can see at the top here, the first is the port summary. This provides all ports along with the breakdown of the switch port capabilities that are listed along with their current state as well. As we move down, we move into the Ports View section, which provides a graphical view of the port status along with its capabilities and switch type. Displaying the legend shows what all icons can be displayed and represented here. The hollow blue box represents the port is up and active. A solid blue port shows that the Ruckus AP is connected to that port. PoE detected ports are represented by the lightning bolts that you see here, indicating the port is capable and enabled for PoE. If the port is being used for PoE, we will be able to see the details when we look at the section below this, and we'll take a look at that a little bit later. Ports that are enabled but are in a down state will be represented by a square hollow box. We can see that in port 2 here, as you can see in this example here. Now, admin ports are going to be in this dark orange with the red outline box within that port, and that indicates that it's an admin down port. You can see also these are enabled ports here from Module 2. The X1 and X2 are both enabled and up. And finally, any stacking ports that are enabled are identified by a capital S in the box along with its status, either blue edge for up or red edge for down. As we can see over here on the Module 3, these two ports are actually admin up or in a down state and are designated as stacking ports. Now as we move down, we can see the port details is in table form and provides us the section of much more granular detail of the port status, including its configured port speed, the VLANs the port is associated with, and hovering over the VLAN tag also provides us the ability to understand if it's a tagged or untagged. Naturally, these being in a single VLAN are probably going to be untagged, but if it had multiple VLAN membership, we could hover over it and provide more detail about that VLAN membership as well. If the port has PoE power capabilities and is being used, the allocation along with the consumption of the connected devices will be displayed. This particular switch does not have it, but we'll go ahead and switch over to the other one, which I do believe it does. We'll go ahead and try that and see if we can't see those details. So we'll scroll back down again. And yes, we can see right here that port 1 actually has a PoE capable device connected to it. And we can see that we're providing an LLDP neighbor name. Now, one of the neat features here is that if this is an AP, and indeed this is actually a click-through, that once you click on this, it will actually take you to the AP details of this particular AP that is connected to this particular port. Now on these table properties, we can see the default is providing us just a limited amount of the switch ports on this particular switch. We can click the gear over here and actually provide an additional entries per page. So let's go ahead and do the full 16 here. And also, like the other graph above or the table above, we can see we can provide an or and statements when we go to the searching features within this environment. And we can also enable or disable additional columns within this table also by this option. Now, as this updates and we see more switches or more ports being enabled or displayed, we do see that we have some additional ports here, and because they have LLDP capabilities, we see that we can identify these particular switches that it's connected to as well within this table. Some of the other options we can see in this particular table is that we can provide a filtering, and that does allow us to be able to filter by VLANs. So we could put in a VLAN values here, and of course those ports that are associated with that VLAN would be displayed here only. And then finally, we can see within this table, we can click the download and it would allow us to export all the data of these particular ports in a CSV file format. Now, as we move on, when it comes to the tabs, we'll scroll up to the top here and we see we have a health tab. And it does provide us overall information of that particular switch. We could see a CPU utilization such as memory. A couple of things we'll point out is that the default is based on the last hour. However, we can select 24 hours, 7 days, and the last 14 days as well. We can also have this table that we see over the left here being displayed in a table format by simply clicking on the table here, and we can also have the switch identified by either its name, which is the default value, MAC, or IP address as well. So now we can see the numerical values when in table form if we so choose. As we scroll down, we can see memory can be addressed the same way. By switching this, we can change it to a table view. And then also it provides us more details about the switch as we scroll down, whether it be the power supplies, what their status is, the temperatures, as well as the fan slots. Now this particular switch is a 7150, which is a fanless, and that's the reason why you're not seeing any fans displayed here. So the next tab that we have is actually the traffic tab. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. And this traffic tab is valuable because it provides you, again, 1 hour, 24 hours, 7 days, and 14 days of information when it comes to the traffic on this particular switch. We can see the first one is the overall total traffic of that switch. In this form, we see it's in table form, but we can also provide it in chart form as well. And it gives us a nice chart graphical view where hovering over any particular time period does give us the hard values of that particular section. As we scroll down, we can see that we have the top ports by traffic, identifying these ports based on their traffic flow. And when we click on them, it will also get a graphical display of the traffic that is traversing that particular port. Notice that total, transmit, and receive are the lines that are being graphed within this graph. We can also click on the gears here as well and switch that to a table form as if we want. And also the show top values can be changed also if we so choose. As we move on to the next tab, we have the Alarm and Events tab, and these are just simply the alarms and events that are occurring on that particular switch, and it can be displayed here. The next one would be the LLDP neighbors, and any devices that are directly connected to the switch will be displayed in this form as long as they have LLDP enabled on both the switch as well as the remote switch. Do note that it's broken into two different sections. One is the LLDP AP neighbors, which again provides a click through where we can actually click on this and it would actually take us to that AP's details within SmartZone. And then the LLDP neighbors that we see down below, and those are listed, providing the information that we are gathering based on those messages that are being sent between the two. And the last tab we see here is the firmware history tab. And we click on this and it provides great information when it comes to the firmware of that particular switch. Let's move back to the other. Nope, this one does populate. So we can see here, we have a time stamp of a configuration, or excuse me, a firmware that's been updated on that switch. We also see the firmware versions, as well as the image name and the status of that. And if there is any kind of failure, it does give us some insight of exactly what happened or what might be cause of that error. We can also see down below that we have a firmware upgrade history, which gives us specifics of which firmware version we went from and to, and a timestamp in which that process took place as well. Now I showed you specific details when it comes to a specific switch within the group. However, we can go click on just the group itself. And when we do that, it does provide us the ability to see more of a group level information when it comes to these tabs. So if we were to click on the first floor here, any of these tabs you see down below are going to provide us details based on that group. So in group view, the general tab is just going to give us the name of the group. The backup or restore is going to provide all the backup and restore of all the switches within that group. Also from a switches and ports tab, we're going to see not only is it going to provide us the models, but also the firmware that is being populated or housed within that group, and an overall port summary of the ports of any switches within that group also. And then down below, as we can see, we would have all the ports listed of switches that are in there. Again, providing all the details that you saw from a switch level standpoint, but this is just basically from the switch group standpoint as well. As we continue on too, we can see from a traffic perspective, it's going to provide us the trend of the overall group, as well as we go down here, we can see it can be from switches by traffic. And again, these can be changed based on if you want uh, a top 10, top 2, excuse me, top 3, a graphic form, or in a table form as you just saw earlier. If we click on these, then it will provide us the information or that traffic for that particular switch as well within that switch group. As we continue on, alarms and events are going to be as a group level from an alarms and events, and then also for the LLDP neighbors. We're going to see all the memberships or all the LLDP detected devices that we have of any switches that are members of this particular switch group. And of course, the APs, like we saw earlier, are going to be listed up at the top here, providing you the information of what switch it's connected to, the switch group, device type, and so forth. So with that, it completes the details of the tabs that we see here. I hope you enjoyed this, and do note that there are other videos that are going to go into more detail of the backup and restore section, as well as the firmware upgrade of these switches. I hope you look for those videos, and I hope this was worth your time. Thank you for watching.